After I gouge it, I will gently try to twist it again. Of course, you got to be careful at this stage because you could break it. But I want the cane to feel like if I twisted it, it would break. If the cane will twist, then I won't use it. I have a line, if you can weave a basket out of it, don't make a reed out of it. So
I like that.
So again, I'm looking for really, really strong cane, because strong cane often equals vibrancy. And the best pieces of cane, which unfortunately are not so prevalent, are both strong, vibrant, and buttery. You know, where you scrape them and the way the knife goes over the cane, it's so satisfying. And yet the cane is still really strong and still vibrant. So that way you can get the biggest dynamic range while having a warm and enveloping sound.
And why can't all cane be like that? That's my question.
That's a good question.
What biologists do we need to talk to cultivate that kind of cane so every piece is like that?
Yeah, that would make life much easier, wouldn't it?
So if you could go back in time, do you have any reed advice that you would give a younger version of yourself?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Okay, the biggest one, every one of my students does better at reed making at the same age than I did, because I was incredibly impatient. And one thing that I've discovered is that if you make reeds with a sense of panic, you cannot do it. It does not work. I mean, I've seen that with my students also. I'll just take a reed and we'll hold it up to the light and I'll say, well, what do you see? And they'll say, oh, well, the left side is much lower than the right side, and I can see that it's thicker on the right side of the heart than the left side. I said, that's right. Did you see that before this moment? No. Mm-hmm. Why not? I don't know. I've had the discussion dozens and dozens of times. And my guess is the reason they couldn't see it is, one, they might not have looked. But secondly, I think when you're in a state of panic, you cannot access your higher cerebral functions. You know, as soon as you start feeling panicky, you get into survival mode. And survival mode is not conducive to your best cerebral thinking mode. And I spent years making reeds as a kid in a state of complete, total panic. And not very successful either. So what I try to teach my students is if you can learn to identify when you're feeling the panic, and then you step away from the reed desk for a moment. Even if you step away from the reed desk and you run in place for 20 seconds vigorously, and you sit down, you will be less panicked. Or get up and eat a tub of yogurt or something, just something where you get away from the reed desk, and then you sit back down and you pick up the reed and pretend somebody asked you, hey, will you look at my reed for a second? And you pick up the reed as if you've never seen it before and say, okay, what do I see? I want the left side to look like the right side and this blade to look like that blade. All four quadrants matching. And if you're in a state of calm, it's very obvious what's out of balance. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would have done is teach myself how to sharpen knives at a younger age.
So important.
Because I didn't know how to really sharpen a knife until I was out of college and in my first job. And as soon as I really learned how to sharpen knives, my reed making and playing improved enormously. So I think I would have taught my young self how to sharpen a knife better than I did.
Good advice.
Regarding knives, I've been using for many, many years these Japanese Ando knives, A-N-D-O. And I love these knives. They're kind of built with samurai sword technology. And what I mean is that super hard steel can get very sharp, but it's also brittle. And softer steel doesn't get as sharp, but it's more flexible. And what the master sword makers understood is that if you could fuse different steels together, you could get the qualities of different hardnesses. And that's what these knives have done. They're very expensive because they're hand forged together, the softer steel with the harder steel. But I have a whole drawer full of knives. I'm trying to get something cheaper and just as good as the Ando, and I haven't been able to find one yet. And I use the John Ferrillo jig, which I've been using for the last 3 years or so. I used Japanese water stones for over 30 years, which worked fine, but I think the Ferrillo jig was a slight improvement. So I figure, if it's an improvement, who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks? So I've been using the Ferrillo jig, the diamond stoned, the Ando knife, and I need to finish it with a leather strap. Now I know Ferrillo doesn't advocate the need for a leather strap with his setup, but I find it helps make the knife grab just a little bit more. So I use that.
Yeah, it's a beveled knife. So can you go a little bit more into detail about how you apply the leather strap at the end?
Well, I lift it up a little bit. I first do it on the flat side, lifting up the edge a tiny bit, and then I do it on the beveled side. And basically, it just makes the knife grab a little more into the cane. And if it grabs more, you can use less downward pressure, and less downward pressure equals more vibrant reed.
Right. Yeah, less compression of the cane, less chance of cracking the reed.
That too. That too. And when you use hard cane, they crack more easily.
So you touched on this a little bit when you discussed about making reeds in a panic. Do you have any wisdom to share about how to keep a healthy balance at the reed desk and between practicing and reed making?
Well, I think it's important to realize that you make reeds so that you can practice.
Yes.
And sometimes oboe students forget that. You know, the goal is to play the oboe, not to make oboe reeds, unless you're in a reed making business. So I think you have to always remind yourself that I'm making reeds so that I can play. As Gladys Elliott would say, a reed is a means to an end, and the end is playing. That's one thing. And another thing I like to do is have a lot of reeds going at the same time. So I make the reeds in like three-day stages. And so I'll leave them as blanks for a day or two, and I'll get them just crowing the next day. And then the following day, I will get them so I can start practicing on them. And when I have a whole bunch of prospects, I find that my anxiety level diminishes. I just feel better about the world if I have a lot of reed prospects. And
Yes.
And then if you have a lot of reed prospects, if one of them doesn't work out, it's not a disaster. It's not a catastrophe. The world has not ended. You could just say, okay, that one doesn't work. I'll do a different one. So I just keep making them so I always have prospects.
It does sometimes feel like the world is coming to an end when we're making reeds, and it's unfortunate.
It can. But I try to remind myself that it's not. I mean, the world may be coming to an end through a pandemic, but not through
Not through reeds. I mean, you have the extra challenge of having to make reeds in high altitude on a regular basis. And you told us that you use 45 millimeter staples, which is a little unusual, and that you use really hard cane. What else do you do to make those reeds work up there in Denver?
Basically, I want the reeds to have the same opening in Denver or Boulder or whatever as they do in Kansas or Iowa, just to name two places. And in order to get the reeds with the same size opening, I have to use slightly smaller cane because the altitude also makes the reed openings collapse a little bit. So if I want my reed to be in Denver like it would be in Kansas, I might use 10.5 cane in Kansas and maybe 9.5 to 10 cane. This is the diameter in millimeters,
Yes.
9.5 to 10 millimeters in Colorado. And that, I know it sounds extreme to some people, but basically it just gets me the same size opening that you have. So basically the secrets is have strong cane and slightly smaller openings. And you have to scrape the reed until it vibrates. And if you have to scrape more out of the cane, well, you have to scrape more out of the cane. And another reason to have strong cane is because you have to scrape more cane to get the reed to vibrate. If the cane does not have inherent strength, there won't be anything left at the end. It'll just be mush. At sea level in humid climates, you can get away with a lot more in cane than you can in Colorado.
That is so true. Give me a humid day any day to make a reed.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for oboists who are on the orchestral audition circuit regarding making reeds?
Well, I think it's sort of what I said before. I think maybe if I was going to take an audition a week before the audition, I would have maybe 12 reed prospects that are really, really good. And maybe to get 12, I might have had to make 20 to get 12. And then I usually would get to an audition early, a number of days early, and I'd start playing through and weeding them out. But the morning of an audition, I would want to have 3 reeds, all of which were good enough to play the audition on. And then at the audition, you just play on the one that plays the best. And one secret I would tell the young oboists of the world is don't fall in love with a reed, because it will break your heart.
Oh, yes.
So you don't choose your reed. Don't say, if your audition's on a Thursday, don't say on Monday, you're my audition reed.
Oh, yeah.
Because then it may not work on Thursday. It may work on Thursday, but you don't know that. So I think just have a number of choices, and whichever one works the best before you walk out on stage, that's the one you use, whether you had planned on using that one or not. I think that's one of the keys. And for me, the more choices I have, the less anxiety I feel. I do not want reed anxiety in auditions. And I also believe that you should have one that's had at least 3, 4, 5 playing sessions with adjusting and drying out in between before the audition. You do not want to make a reed the morning of an audition, because you'll have to sit around for an extra hour and suddenly your fantastic reed will have stiffened up and won't play at all. So I think you want to play in a reed that's very well broken in, so you have a better chance of some stability that way.
Right. And you're already anxious enough about the audition itself. You don't want to add to that anxiety.
I don't want to be anxious about my reed at all.
At all.
I just want to feel, okay, I have a number of prospects, any one of which will work, and I'll use whatever is best.
You had what I would say, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to record with Sir Neville Marriner and Academy of St. Martin in the Fields when you recorded your Strauss and the Mulligan Concerto. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that experience, if you had any reed challenges.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, it was in London, and London is at sea level or close to it. So I went there with 30 reed prospects that were all crowing.
Wow!
And I got to
Nice.
and I got to London 10 days before the recording session to both get over jet lag and to work on reeds. And that's all I did. I was working on reeds and practicing 6 or 7 hours a day in maybe 3 or 4, hour and a half increments. And I would just go through the reeds and one by one, adjust it, play on it for a while, let it dry. Take the next one, adjust it, play on it for a while, and let it dry. But I found when I got through 16 that I thought, okay, be reasonable. You don't really have the time to go through 30. So I kind of stuck to 16
Just
at
16.
first. And I just would go through them in an assembly line, just soak it up, adjust it as necessary, practice on it, let it dry. Take the next one, soak it up, adjust it, let it dry. And the idea is to have a whole pile of broken in excellent reeds. And the first concerto we did, the Mulligan, I played 5 different reeds on that recording session. So basically every break I would take out another reed. I wanted a fresh reed, and and sometimes during the break I'd clip it and work on the tip and redo it. I was doing whatever the reed needed. in order to make it work. So all the breaks I would be working on the reeds for the next session. And then the Strauss Concerto the next day, I used 3 of the Mulliken reeds.